Today's story is about a guy whose career was built around fighting for people getting pushed out of homes they had every legal right to occupy. As a housing rights attorney, then his own mother called on a Friday night and gave him 48 hours to vacate a house he inherited from his grandmother. No request, no negotiation, just an announcement. What his family miscalculated was that the man they were calling had spent years winning exactly this type of case in court. By Monday, there was a locksmith, a security system, 2 police officers, a restraining order, and a recording of their own attorney that demolished every bluff his dad had built. Let's get into it. My mom called Friday night and gave me 48 hours to vacate my inherited house. I spent the weekend setting a legal trap. Monday, I sprung it with police watching. I'm a housing rights attorney in Boston. My whole job is protecting people who are being pushed out of homes they have every legal right to occupy. I know property law the way most people know their own commute. Automatic, instinctive, second nature. I've spent years fighting landlords, developers, and family members who try to take what isn't theirs. So when my own mother called me on a Friday evening and told me I had 48 hours to clear out of a house I legally owned, I didn't panic. I didn't argue. I just got quiet. And quiet, in my experience, is when things start getting dangerous for the other side. To understand why this hit the way it did, you need to know about the house and about my grandmother. Elaine Warren bought the place in the early 60s. A 2-story house on a quiet street in the suburbs of Boston, wraparound porch, original hardwood floors dating back to 1920, and blue shutters on the front windows that she repainted every few years without fail. Out back, she kept a garden that she treated like a second job. Peonies every spring, vegetables through summer, an old wood bench she sat on every single evening from June through October. She knew every plant by variety and had opinions about all of them. My parents, Nancy and Harold, were the corporate ladder type. Promotions, country club memberships, performance reviews at the dinner table. Parenting was basically a task they delegated. So my grandmother raised me, in all the ways that actually matter. Summers and most weekends from when I was small, that house was home. She taught me to fix a leaky faucet before I was 10, patch drywall, change a tire, cook a full Thanksgiving dinner from scratch. She had this thing she used to say, a man who can maintain things doesn't need to depend on anyone. I nodded along as a kid without fully getting it. I understand it now. When I got into law school, she converted the sunroom into a study for me. Plants on every windowsill, decent light, a small desk wedged in the corner. I sat in there and prepped for the bar exam, surrounded by her ferns and the smell of whatever she was cooking in the next room. The bar exam is a 3-day marathon, and I was terrified going in. She didn't offer pep talks or motivational speeches. She just kept the coffee hot and left plates of food outside the door. When I passed, she made a full pot roast and acted like I'd won a championship. My parents showed up to the celebration and left early for a business dinner. She patted my shoulder and said, "Their loss," and that was the end of it. She was like that. No drama, no ceremony. She just showed up consistently for 30 years. I remember being maybe 13 and convinced I'd broken the kitchen faucet. Full on stripped the threads trying to fix a leak myself. I was terrified to tell her. She came in, looked at it, nodded once and said, "Okay, now we learn the hard way." She went to the hardware store, bought the right part, came back, and we fixed it together. She didn't make it a lesson. She didn't turn it into a speech. She just made it normal, that fixing things was part of being a person, and that mistakes were just the price of learning. By the time I was 17, I could probably have rebuilt half that house from scratch, which looking back is exactly what she intended. She also wrote, letters mostly, every time I was away, college, law school. That summer I clerked in DC, she'd send a letter every couple weeks. Typed on that old machine she kept on the kitchen desk. News about the neighborhood, updates on the garden, observations about whatever book she was reading. She never made them feel like she was checking in. They felt like dispatches from a place where someone was genuinely glad you existed. I kept all of them. Actually, I kept hers and she kept mine. I found out after she passed that she'd saved every letter I ever sent her. Filed in order, dated, in a wooden box. That one still gets me sometimes. My sister Stephanie is 4 years younger than me. She took a different path, went to the business school my parents picked, married the man they approved of, never once pushed back on anything they said. She became what they'd always wanted. I became the one who chose public interest law over corporate, won his first big case protecting a group of elderly tenants from an illegal eviction, and heard his father describe it as small time compared to real law. That was the dynamic, had been for as long as I can remember. When Grandma Elaine passed 3 years ago, her will was clean and clear. The house went to me, full stop. No conditions, no provisions, nothing left open to interpretation. Her attorney had drafted it carefully, and she'd signed it with full clarity. I also got a letter, her handwriting, 3 pages, tucked in with the will documents. I've kept it in my desk ever since. She wrote that she knew exactly what she was doing and why. That house had sheltered 4 generations, and she wanted it to go to someone who'd actually appreciate it. She knew what it meant to me, and she made sure it was protected. My parents sat stone-faced at the reading and said nothing on the record. I noted that. I kept my downtown apartment because the suburban commute on 60-hour weeks is a grind I wasn't ready to take on. But I visited the house regularly, paid every bill, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, tended the garden when I had time, turned down several developer offers over 2 years without much deliberation. Some things don't have a price. I had plans to move in eventually. Maybe when my caseload settled or when I was ready to put more space between myself and the city. I wasn't rushing. Then, on a Friday evening in early spring, after a brutal week in court, I picked up my mother's call. "We need to discuss the house," she said. No greeting. I sat down on my couch. "Okay. Your sister's divorce was finalized last month. She and Amanda have nowhere to go. Your father and I have decided they'll move into your grandmother's house." I said as evenly as I could, "That house is mine. Grandma left it to me in her will." "Don't be difficult, Cal. You don't even live there. It's sitting empty while your sister and your niece need a roof. Family helps family." I went through it plainly. The will was legally executed. I paid every bill associated with the property. I maintained it. This wasn't a matter of selfishness. It was a matter of who owned the house. And the answer to that question was in a filed public document. "Your father already spoke with Martin," she said. Martin was the family attorney my parents had used for 30 years. "There are provisions in the will we can challenge. Residency requirements you're not meeting." That was a flat-out lie. I knew that will inside and out, and there were no such provisions. My grandmother had left the house to me unconditionally, but I didn't say that. I kept listening. "You have 48 hours to get any personal items out. After that, Stephanie moves in." Before I could respond, my father's voice came on the line. He'd been on a second extension the entire time. "Cal, this isn't up for debate. Stephanie needs the house more than you do. Fighting this will only hurt your niece. Is that really what you want? To deprive a child of a stable home because you're holding on to sentiment?" The manipulation was transparent and nothing new. I'd heard versions of this framing my entire life, that my preferences were inherently selfish, that the family's needs always outranked mine. I told them I needed to speak with Martin directly before anything moved forward. "He's unavailable until Monday," my dad said. "Papers will be ready Monday, but the deadline is 48 hours. Be reasonable for once." The call ended. Within 5 minutes, Stephanie texted, "I know this is hard, but Amanda and I have nowhere else to go. Mom says you never use the house anyway. I promise I'll take good care of it. I can help you move your stuff this weekend if you want." I put my phone face down on the counter and stood at the kitchen window for a minute. Not stunned exactly, more like watching something snap into focus. I'd spent years watching families do versions of this. The entitled relative who decides a deceased parent's wishes were wrong, the sibling who decides need outranks law, the parent who mistakes authority for ownership. I'd fought all of those cases from the outside. Now I was standing in the middle of one. And it was my own kitchen. And it was my grandmother's house. And my parents had a moving truck scheduled, but they'd called the wrong person. I sat back down and started the list. Lock change. First thing Saturday. Security cameras. Thomas, if he was available. Jackie for legal confirmation. The restraining order motion if it got to that. Every document on that house, organized and ready. I'd done triage like this for clients 100 times. The fact that it was personal didn't change the process. Hold on, for listeners, this is me jumping in, not Cal. His mother called to announce a decision that had already been made, like she was sending a schedule notification. His dad was on a secret second extension the whole time, waiting for his cue. And Stephanie texted within 5 minutes, past the negotiation phase, straight to move-in planning. This wasn't a family conversation. This was a coordinated campaign. And they ran it against a housing rights attorney. That's like showing up to commit property fraud and the guy at the desk built his entire career fighting property fraud cases. I'm not worried about Cal. I'm genuinely worried for them. I spent Friday night at my kitchen table pulling every document I had on that house. Deed, will, property tax records going back 3 years, insurance policy, the letter from my grandmother's attorney confirming unconditional ownership. Organized everything into a digital folder with a chronological timeline. I've built case files for strangers in worse situations. Might as well do it for myself. I emailed Jackie around 11. A colleague who specializes in estate law explained the situation. By midnight, she'd confirmed what I already knew. My parents had no legal ground whatsoever. She also gave me the advice that turned out to be the most critical part of everything. Don't let them get a foot in the door. Literally. If Stephanie moves in before you take legal action, you're looking at formal eviction proceedings to remove her. That's slow, expensive, and messy. Lock them out before they ever get in. So I started making calls. First thing Saturday morning, a locksmith was at the house. I had every external lock changed, keypad entry for the front door with remote access, and an activity log, new deadbolts on the side and back with keys only I had. Done by 10. Then a security company a former client had referred installed cameras at every entry point, motion alerts straight to my phone, live feeds I could pull up from anywhere. The full setup, same day. Then I called Thomas. We'd known each other a few years. He was an officer in the suburb where the house sits, and we'd crossed paths on a couple of cases over the years. I laid it out for him. He didn't hesitate, said he'd bring his partner and be available Sunday evening, which was when I figured they'd make their move. I also drafted a cease and desist letter that afternoon and prepped an emergency motion for a temporary restraining order, ready to file first thing Monday. I was pretty sure I'd need it. By noon, I was at the house. I want to say I went straight to work, but honestly, I stood in the kitchen for a few minutes first. Her handwriting was still on the label of a tin on the counter. Apple cake. She'd made that thing maybe 100 times. I still don't know the full recipe. I left the tin where it was and got moving. I packed what I couldn't risk leaving behind. Her wedding ring and the pearl necklace she wore to everything that mattered. The photo albums? 4 generations in those things, some of the photos going back to the 40s. A handmade quilt she'd finished the year I was born. I left the wooden box of letters where it was for now. It wasn't going anywhere with the new locks on the doors. The security system was fully operational by mid-afternoon. Tested everything twice. When the technician left, I locked up with the new keys and headed back to my apartment. Around 4, Stephanie called. Hey, I'm thinking of coming by tomorrow morning to start measuring for curtains. Would 9 work? Just like that. Curtains. For a house she didn't own. I told her I wouldn't be there and that we needed to have a real conversation before any plans were made. What is there to discuss? Mom and Dad already told you what's happening. The house is legally mine, Stephanie. Grandma left it to me in her will. There was a pause. Then, only because you were always her favorite. Years of something spilling out. You're going to deny my daughter a home out of spite. I told her this had nothing to do with favoritism. Property law didn't care about favoritism. The house was mine, and the will was clear. Watch me, she said, and hung up. That evening, the texts came. Paint colors she was considering for the living room. Whether Grandma's dining table could go into storage since she didn't need something that large. A note that Mom said I might want the china cabinet, so I should let her know, otherwise they'd sell it. The china cabinet. With my grandmother's depression glass collection that she'd explained to me piece by piece when I was 9. They were casually discussing selling her things. I didn't respond to any of it. My mother called 3 times. On the 3rd, I picked up. She went through the full repertoire. I was selfish. I didn't have children, so my priorities were inherently lesser. Family adapts to circumstances. Then my dad got on the line again and told me they'd found precedent to challenge the will based on my grandmother's mental state in her final months. That one made me genuinely angry. My grandmother was completely sharp until the end. Any doctor who saw her would confirm it. Her bridge group would confirm it. The library volunteers she worked with every Thursday would confirm it. And my parents both knew that. I told my dad what he was suggesting was false, and he knew it, and that any attorney who helped build a case on a fabricated competency claim should understand what that looked like professionally. He said this wasn't over and ended the call. Pause. For listeners, this is still me. Take in what this man's Saturday looked like. Changed the locks, installed a full security system, prepped a restraining order, drafted a cease and desist, packed irreplaceable heirlooms, coordinated a locksmith and a security team, all while being a full-time attorney fresh off a week in court. Meanwhile, his parents were texting furniture ideas for a house they didn't own. His dad threatened to fabricate a mental competency story about his own deceased mother to a judge. This is Ocean's 11. The heist is already running. The villain's still making speeches. Monday is about to be very educational for everyone on that driveway. Sunday afternoon, the doorbell at my apartment building rang. I checked the building camera and saw my parents and Stephanie standing outside. Stephanie had brought Amanda, my 5-year-old niece. I buzzed them up. My mother came in wearing the wounded disappointment expression she's been deploying on me since I was a teenager. That particular combination of hurt and accusation she uses when she wants the moral high ground without earning it. My dad had a folder under his arm. Stephanie walked Amanda directly to the front of the group the moment the door opened. First move, maximum emotional weight. Aunt Cal, are we going to live in the house with the big tree swing? Amanda asked. Obviously coached. She's 5, she doesn't have housing opinions on her own. Before Stephanie could continue, I picked up my tablet from the coffee table, opened a kid's app, and handed it to Amanda. She took it and relocated to the couch without complaint. My mother looked annoyed. Stephanie looked furious. That was unnecessary, Stephanie said. Using a 5-year-old as a negotiating tactic is what's unnecessary, I said. The answer to this conversation doesn't change based on who's in the room. My mother launched in. Everything the family had done for me over the years. How I was destroying things over a house. How I was being cold and selfish. Stephanie's eyes were going red. My dad let them go first, then opened his folder and slid a document across my counter. He called it a formal notice of intent to challenge the will. I picked it up and spent about 20 seconds on it. No official letterhead, no case filing number, no attorney's signature that carried any actual weight. This was a document someone typed to look official to someone who wasn't a lawyer. This has no legal standing, I said, and slid it back. No letterhead, no filing number, nothing. And if Martin is genuinely involved in this, he should understand that helping execute a fraudulent property transfer carries professional consequences. Serious ones. You're threatening our family attorney, my mother said. I'm stating facts. Same facts I've been stating since Friday. The house is mine, it stays mine, and it's not available for Stephanie. Not tomorrow. Not at any point. Stephanie cut in. You know what your problem is? You always made everything about you. Grandma loved you best, and now you're using that to punish my daughter for something she had nothing to do with. This isn't about who Grandma loved more, I said. It's about a legally executed will and who the property belongs to. That's it. Everything else you're adding on top of that is your story, not mine. My dad went red. He pulled his folder back across the counter. This isn't over. Be prepared for what comes next. I'm always prepared, I said. Are you? They left. Amanda waved from over Stephanie's shoulder as the door closed. I leaned against the wall for about 30 seconds. Not unsettled, focused. Monday was the one that counted. Wait. I need to formally name the man who walked into a housing rights attorney's apartment with a fake document in a folder, tried to deploy his 5-year-old granddaughter as an emotional play, and left with, be prepared for what comes next. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Compliance Notice. A man so used to unchallenged authority that he printed a Word document, put it in a folder, and called it a legal notice. To a lawyer. And are you? Isn't a scared man's question. It's a question from someone who already knows what's loaded in the chamber. His dad brought a bluff. Cal brought the entire legal system. Those are not equivalent preparations. Monday morning, I took the day off. My supervisor didn't push back. I hadn't missed a day for personal reasons in 6 years, so I had the credit to spend. I filed the emergency TRO at 8 in the morning and had it granted by 8:45. Wait, no, 8:40. I remember because I was already in the car when the confirmation came through. Emergency motions for documented imminent property threats move fast when the paperwork is solid. I was parked down the street from the house before 9. Clear line of sight to the driveway. On the passenger seat, the deed, the will, the attorney's letter confirming unconditional ownership, and the restraining order. Thomas texted at 10, to say he and his partner Rivera were 5 minutes out. At 9:30, my phone buzzed. Motion at the front of the house. I pulled up the camera feed and watched my dad doing a full perimeter walk, trying door handles, checking windows, standing in front of the new keypad lock on the front door, with the expression of a man whose plan was not going as planned. He made a phone call, gesturing at the house while he talked. 20 minutes later, a moving truck rolled up. Then my mother's SUV pulled in behind it. Dad went to meet them in the driveway. More discussion. Then Stephanie walked up to the front door and tried her key, the old one that no longer fit. She tried it again, looked at it, tried a third time. I started my car. I drove over and parked directly behind the moving truck, completely blocked it. 3 faces turned toward me. My mother recovered first. Finally decided to show up and do the right thing. "I'm here to make sure the right thing happens," I said. Thomas's cruiser pulled to the curb right on cue. He and Rivera got out, calm and professional. My dad drew himself up, the businessman posture, the one designed to make people back down, and asked what this was about. Thomas explained that I'd requested police presence for a potential trespassing situation, and that the property was registered to Cal Warren, who had not granted anyone permission to enter. "We're his family," Stephanie said. "That doesn't change the property record," Rivera said simply. I handed copies of the restraining order to each of them and waited while they read. My mother's expression went from confident to uncertain. Stephanie's went from uncertain to something close to panic. My dad read the whole document slowly, jaw tight, then looked up and told me this wouldn't stand, and that Martin was already preparing the challenge to the will. I pulled out my phone. "That's interesting," I said, "because I called Martin this morning." I pressed play. "For the record, Mr. Warren, I never advised the Warren family that there were grounds to contest Elaine Warren's will. The will is legally sound, and Cal Warren is the sole rightful owner of the property at 42 Maple Street. I have not prepared, nor will I prepare, any documents challenging this fact. If Harold or Nancy Warren have represented otherwise, they have misrepresented my professional opinion and my services." The color left my dad's face in a way I'd genuinely never seen before. My mother looked from him to me, then back to him. Her voice came out quiet. "You lied to me?" He blustered. Martin was being overly cautious. There were other attorneys. I said no reputable attorney would touch a challenge this thin. The will was properly executed. My grandmother was fully capable until the very end. Every doctor and person who knew her would confirm it, and there were simply no grounds. Every attorney they'd ever consulted had apparently told them the same thing. But I didn't have the full picture on that yet. That came later. My mother was still staring at my dad, not at me. Something was shifting between them in real time. Some version of the story she'd been telling herself about this whole situation was coming apart, and she was starting to see the seams. She asked him again, more quietly. Had he actually talked to Martin? Had Martin actually said they had a case? My dad said he was being cautious one more time and then stopped talking. Stephanie asked eventually what was supposed to happen now. That their stuff was in the truck. That they'd already given up their apartment. There was real distress underneath it, and I noticed. But distress doesn't override property law, and it doesn't make what my family attempted acceptable. I told her I'd send her a list of short-term rentals in the area. That I was sorry she was in a difficult spot, but the house wasn't an option. My dad said, "Let's go," in the way that means the conversation ended, because he lost it. He guided my mother toward the car. Stephanie argued about the truck. He told her to figure it out. They left. Rivera confirmed to the departing cars that the restraining order was active, and any entry attempt would have immediate legal consequences. Thomas walked over after they pulled out. "You okay?" I looked at the house, the porch swing, the garden pushing through along the back fence, the blue shutters she'd last repainted the spring before she died. "Better than okay," I said. "I think I'm exactly where I need to be." Final update. The days after were predictable. Extended family I hadn't heard from in years suddenly had opinions. My mother's sister Dorothy left a voicemail saying my grandmother would be ashamed of me. The fact that they were invoking her name to pressure me into violating her explicitly stated, legally filed, signed in front of witnesses' wishes. Not one of them caught that as ironic. My cousin Jake was one of the only ones who asked for my side before forming an opinion. When I explained it, he texted back, "That sounds exactly like Uncle Harold and Aunt Nancy. Good for you." I've always liked Jake. His mom was in the voicemail group. Families are complicated that way. Stephanie alternated between angry and desperate. "You've ruined everything," would come through, then a few days later. "Please, just a few months until I can save up a deposit." I held the same position both times. I'd offered to help her find alternative housing and contribute to a security deposit, and that offer stayed on the table. But the house wasn't moving. She and Amanda moved into my parents' guest house in the meantime, which I found out later through a mutual friend, which meant the nowhere to go framing had been somewhat overstated from the start. But the part that really hit me came about a week after the Monday confrontation, in the form of an email from Martin. He apologized for being caught in the middle and attached a set of documents that I had to read twice before they fully landed. My parents had first consulted him about challenging my grandmother's will 3 years ago. Not after Stephanie's divorce. That was just the pretext they'd been waiting for. He had refused then, the same as he'd refused now, but he felt I had a right to know the complete history. The attached emails laid it out plainly. A deliberate, long-running plan. Multiple attorney consultations over 3 years. Every single one told my parents they had no viable case. There was one email from my dad to a lawyer who had declined to take it. He wrote, in part, "My mother's decision to leave the house to Cal, rather than allowing the family to determine its best use, was short-sighted and emotionally driven. We need to correct this mistake." Correct this mistake. A mistake being my grandmother exercising her legal right to leave her own property to whoever she wanted. I sat at my kitchen table and read through those emails for a long time. What got me wasn't the scheming. I'd already accepted that my parents were capable of that. What got me was the 3 years. All those holiday dinners, all those phone calls, all those moments where I was trying to be a reasonable adult member of this family, while they were actively consulting attorneys to take my house. The whole time. I'd been sitting across from them at Thanksgiving while they were doing this. I forwarded everything to Jackie. Her response was short and direct. This was bordering on conspiracy to commit property fraud, and the documentation would end any future challenge attempt permanently. She wasn't wrong. About a month later, my dad sent a certified letter threatening renewed legal action. My response, drafted with Jackie's help, included every one of Martin's attachments. I never heard from him about the house again. My mother sends holiday cards now. No acknowledgement of what happened. Just cheerful normalcy, like we're two people who drifted apart and happened to exchange pleasantries. I return the gifts she sometimes includes, but keep the cards in a box in my closet. I'm genuinely not sure why. Some threads don't tie off cleanly. That one's still loose, and I've stopped trying to force it. About 3 months after everything, I got a letter from Stephanie. An actual handwritten letter, which I genuinely didn't expect. She said she owed me an apology. That she'd been so deep in her own situation, she never stopped to ask whether what she was participating in was actually right. She said watching me hold my ground made her look at some things differently, about the family and how it had always operated. She'd found an apartment. She and Amanda were settled. She was working on some things. I wrote back and thanked her, wished her well. I don't know if it becomes something more eventually. It might. It might not. I'm definitely not rushing toward it, but I'm not closing the door either. What I've come to understand is that my grandmother knew exactly what she was doing when she left me that house. Not just legally. She'd seen the dynamic long before I could articulate it. She'd watched my parents operate for 30 years. She knew how they handled things they wanted. So she made sure that house was mine in a way they couldn't undo. She put it in writing, filed it properly, and made it iron. That was her way of protecting me even after she was gone. And fighting for it was the least I could do in return. 6 months after the confrontation, I sold my downtown apartment and moved into the house full-time. The commute is longer, and I don't care at all. I wake up every morning in the room where I used to sit for the bar exam and look out at the garden she planted 50 years before I was born. I tend it the way she showed me. Same varieties she always kept, notes from the journal she left behind, a few additions I've made myself. The peonies come back every spring without being asked to. She used to say that's what happens when you give something the right conditions. She said it about the garden. I don't think that's the only thing she meant. Look, Cal didn't do anything explosive here. No speeches, no yelling in the driveway. He documented everything, changed the locks, lined up the law, and showed up ready. When his dad bluffed about the family attorney, Cal had that attorney's voice queued up to play back on the spot. That's not revenge. That's preparation. Real difference. The house was always his. His grandmother made sure of it. He just made sure everyone else understood it too. Drop a comment. What would you have done if your own family pulled something like this? And if you're not subscribed yet, hit the button. We post stories every day and you don't want to miss what's coming.